Ruslan.
How would you respond to folks in the LGBTQ community like a Jackie Hill Perry, who is a full-on, practicing lesbian, had girlfriends, and then had a change of mind, repented, and now she's married and she has an amazing family with Preston Perry, who's a Christian apologist, or side B LGBTQ people, where Jackie had, I am going into a heterosexual marriage and relationship, and then there's side B people that would just say, hey, I'm LGBTQ, and even go as far as to say, I think God made me this way. However, they still hold a scriptural sex ethic, if you will, right? So side B LGBTQ, and then folks like Jackie Hill Perry, and not to make you like the spokesperson for all LGBTQ people, but how would you how do you speak to those two types of situations? Because those are both, those happen frequently. Both of those situations are fairly prevalent. I know a handful of people that were immersed in the act and then got married and went on to have families, and they're doing great. And then I also know people who said, yeah, you know what, I'm just not into the opposite sex, and I'm just going to be celibate, and it's not even a physical thing for them. It's more of like they miss the emotional connection, the intimacy, and they work on other ways of getting that. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I of all people, I'm not going to sit here and judge anyone. I just don't want anyone to be living in shame and fear. So if you're making that autonomous choice and it's coming from a place of true peace within your spirituality and within yourself, then I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, you should live your life differently. Jackie, you should go out and be with as many women as you want. Like, I'm not about that. I just would rather listen to people and hear their stories and grant that the experience that they're having is true for them. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I have a hard time finding the peace and center in that, because I have, talked to so many people that are survivors of conversion therapy, for example. Like, conversion therapy has a 99% failure rate.
Yeah, I don't think Jackie was a part of any conversion therapy, to be fair.
Yeah, and that's fair. Conversion therapy is a very specific thing, but at the same time, it was spearheaded by homosexual people, or quote, same-sex attracted people. And even when you look at those situations, even those leaders are now just out and living as gay people. So I'm just not seeing, again, like we were talking about before, the fruits. I see so much despair and unhappiness, and not only that, but not being able to run this race long. Like you were saying, like, pack light. It is such a heavy burden, a lifelong celibacy call that you didn't even necessarily want, but you just have to do it because you were made to be attracted to the same sex as you. Like,
what is heterosexual people that take a oath of celibacy, and other denominations, the Orthodox monks, that so it's not like this would be the only group of people in history, but there are other people throughout history and in church today that take celibacy oaths.
Yeah, but it's the only group of people in our faith practice that are forced into that. It's not a decision. Like, we can say we're letting you have a decision, but in the Bible, even Paul describes celibacy as a gift, but it's also a choice. It's not a mandate. We are mandating LGBTQ people into celibacy, and I don't
know if I'm mandating anybody. I think what you said earlier was beautiful, in that, hey, everybody's welcome, a part of your community, and I think that's amazing. I would say that I think there's hypocrisy from the LGBTQ community where everything is tolerant except a Jackie Hill Perry, and she's a bigot. I think that's very hypocritical. Or everything is non-binary, and you get to choose your own identity, and sexual orientation is fluid, and gender is fluid, and all these things are fluid, but yet someone that was gay and becomes heterosexual and says, hey, that wasn't beneficial to me. Now I'm a straight mother, artist, author who loves Jesus and loves my husband. they're a bigot. I think that's extremely, it's like tolerance is cool until somebody puts up a position that's not congruent with that position, and then they're instantly otherized, right? And this happens with side B LGBT and folks like Jackie Hill Perry. And I don't think that's fair, but I don't seldom is that hypocrisy called out or exposed.
No, that's absolutely, I agree with that completely. I think that we need to be consistent with what we're saying. If we're going to love people, we have to consistently love people. And if we accept people and give grace and listen to people when they say, God told me this, or I'm living in peace, as, you know, in this heterosexual relationship, as Jackie says, then yes, we absolutely have to grant that that person is telling their truth.
Yeah. And I think you're totally right. I think I accept, I'm with you, accept people, love people. I have LGBTQ people that in my life that I love, that I consider friends, that I go out and I hang out with. And I think maybe where me and you would disagree is that I would say, hey, I love you, and I'm your friend and I'm in your corner. This right here, I'm not going to affirm, because my buddies, I had multiple friends do this, Brenda, who up and left their wife because they felt like it. I'm just gonna divorce my wife. No justification, no moral grounds. Wife is a single mother, and they just decided to. I couldn't affirm that either, and I actually ended up losing close friendships because I said, "Bro, you're a coward. That is not okay. You don't get to justify that. Your wife doesn't have any skills because she's been a mother for the past 5 years, and you're literally just gonna up and leave, right?" So in the same way, I don't affirm that. I would, you know, or whoever, any name. My mother's an alcoholic. I love my mother dearly, but I don't affirm that in her. That doesn't mean that I'm not there for her. That doesn't mean I'm not present in her life. That doesn't mean I'm not with her. That doesn't mean I won't do anything. She fell in Brenda, my mom fell and broke her shoulder this year. And so I've been going over there every single day, and she broke her shoulder because she has 2 bad hips, that she was drunk, and because she didn't want to get her hips fixed, she fell and had a terrible break on her shoulder, right? And all of this is like, yo, like, what are you doing? You should have gotten this fixed 10 years ago. My mom, she's like 58. I love her. I love her dearly. I'm there for her no matter what. I'm in her life. But I'm not gonna affirm that in her. I'm not gonna say, "Yay, you have a drinking problem," right? And maybe you think that's intolerant, or that makes me a bigot to acknowledge a biblical sex ethic. But I would say, well, that's kind of a bummer for someone to not tolerate that position, because it's not like I'm elevating one over the other. And by the way, this is not something I talk about on my channel. I'm very strong on Christians should be known by the things we're for, not by the things we're against. But I do think if we're looking at, again, falling short of the standard of God, drunkenness, sexual immorality, hatred, all of it, it's, all of it. And so that's probably where me and you would probably disagree and say, well, based on your view of scripture and my, view of scripture, we would say, yeah, we disagree on this specific thing. I don't know if you want to chime in or if you had a question for me.
No, yeah, the 2 things that came up for me is I know that Jackie Hill Perry, and she has even, I believe, said this herself, that she doesn't like that she's propped up as like, oh, here's the example. Oh, look, here's a one person that was successfully doing this. So look.
She's like the main celebrity, Christian celebrity. I'm sure there's others.
Yeah, and I don't think that's fair either, because she is doing something that is profoundly difficult, and like I said, upwards of 99% of people are not able to achieve the same. What I might argue is just self-constraint and self-control versus an actual change of
that's true.
who she fundamentally is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because I haven't spoken to her, but I have listened to interviews, and I have so much grace and love for her, but like, maybe she's just an impeccably self-controlled person, and that is not necessarily.
Is it possible that God changed her heart, though? I know that question can come off whack, but is it possible that God did a work?
Yeah, no, if she wants to tell me that, great. Like I said, like I grant someone's own personal spiritual experience to be true if they're telling me that it's true. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like it's an anomaly from what I've seen. And so many people, quote, fail at forcing themselves into heterosexual relationships or staying celibate for their whole lives, which, again, I said, has become a mandate instead of a blessing or even a curse.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's right. And then the other thing that I was going to say was, once I'm trying to think of the last thing you just said. I don't remember. I lost
It's all
my
good.
thought.
You're good.
But I think one thing I wanted to ask you before we end is just like, and you don't have to go into crazy detail, but I think, again, we're just talking about gray, which is, I would say, like the world we're living in. So if you and your wife, and I see this so many times, it's like people are brought up in this purity culture, modesty culture, this anti-LGBTQ culture, and then when the fruit comes up and it's rotten or there's a problem with it, then we have to counsel those people through that rotten fruit and try to help them through all of this sexual dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like curious from your experience, if you're willing to share, like what kind of things you had to work through. Because for me, I'm not trying to be out here saying, do whatever you want, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm out here saying what we are doing in all of these cases is not working.
Mm-hmm.
And we have so much proof that it's not working. So, you know, like how can we change that to make it actually healthy? And like I said, that's why I'm a sex positive Christian. That's why I define myself that way, because it leaves room for those grays and those questions and those discoveries of your sexuality. And I am anti-porn for the most part.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's, again, everything goes back to harm. Like sin is causing harm. So if someone is being harmed in a situation, there's a problem there. And that is where I'll push back too on you saying you wouldn't affirm a gay lifestyle just as you wouldn't affirm your friend ditching his wife. I'm like, well, in one case there's harm, in another case there's not. I don't know why that's such an inconsistency. I don't see Jesus there.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah, I think that's a fair pushback. I think again, I would have to defer back to some of the I don't know enough, but again, if we're looking at how is the suicide rate in countries that are affirming, how's the domestic violence rate in countries that are affirming, I don't know if there is or isn't harm, so I'm not going to ignorantly speak, and I do need to brush up on those studies in terms of those specific surveys in those countries. In terms of me and my wife, there's a lot that I wish people would have told me, and I ended up being the guy to tell my friends who then got married after me. Just honestly, just patience, just like physical patience, just patience, because physically, intercourse was difficult for a while, for a long time. So patience. I came from a ton of sexual trauma. I got exposed to pornography at 5. I'd been molested as a kid, grew up with a confused sexual identity, like a lot of stuff that I, subsequently went to therapy for, and then was also, promiscuous right before coming to Christ. And not promiscuous as in multiple partners, just like having a lot of sex before I became like surrendered my life to Jesus. And so one, patience, and not thinking that this was going to be the magic bullet that was going to solve all of my sexual deviancy and my sexual sin. Like, yeah, because I was just telling people I want to get married and have sex, and it was like, yeah. And then it took years to get to have a healthy sex life. So I think that physically, and then I would also say, I will say that after my wife had my son, who's 6. Physically, it became much easier, right? And I don't know if that's the autonomy of the vagina being stretched out, because of a child coming through there, or what exactly. But after the fact, it definitely became easier. But to your point, no one told me it was going to take a ton of work. No one told me it was going to require a ton of patience. No one told me, hey, dummy, get your house in order. Stop looking at porn. Stop doing these things ahead of time, because this isn't the magic bullet that you think it is. It's just going to be like, yay, now you're married and all your sexual issues are solved because you have some, right? So I ended up, pulling my friends to the side on their wedding nights and being like, hey, check this out. this isn't what you think it's going to be the first time, especially if she's a virgin or she hasn't had sex in a long time. This is going to require work. This is going to require effort. You got to be super patient. And we've had other people call my wife on their wedding night, freaking out because they couldn't even do the act of intercourse, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's tough. So I'm with you there. If you watch this and this made you feel a way or threatened you, it shouldn't have. Brenda's presenting different ideas. If anything, conversations like this reaffirm my views. It gives me stuff to think about, gives me research to do. But I do not feel threatened having these conversations, and neither should you. Like, you really shouldn't. Send Brenda some love, give her an encouraging comment on Instagram, give this video a like, and yeah, maybe we'll do this again sometime. Peace.
Joshua the king came down and bore it all. Yeah, conversations front of the fireplace. All of my mistakes, how do I erase? Wanna operate at a higher pace. Birth pains causing the body to dilate. On a first name basis with the worst pain facing. Moments in isolation. See, I was hoping I would do this to get more family time. A busy mind and worried heart is